Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Hines. I'm curator of Film at Museum of the Moving Image. Welcome to the Reverse Shot Happy Hour. It's our happy hour for Friday, July 17th. If you are here live, thanks so much for tuning in and joining us. If you are watching this on the YouTube recording, thank you for tuning in. And thank you, all of you, for your interest in the Reverse Shot Happy Hour and for your interest in engagement with and support of Museum of the Moving Image. This is part of our online programming that we've been ramping up since mid-March, at a time that we all remember well in terms of what has happened in our world. But we're very, very glad that the Reverse Shot Happy Hour has been a real thread and opportunity for community in a recurring sense every Friday, and to see it develop over time, developing a character and culture of its own. Incredibly grateful for our friends at Reverse Shot for what they do all the time in terms of publishing for their articles, and also now this engagement every week for the happy hour. I'll leave it to the group to continue with the happy hour. I'll be back later on, but for now, let's bring on the hosts, the editors and founders of Reverse Shot, Michael Koresky and Jeff Reichert, and longtime contributor and filmmaker, Farihah Zaman.
Hey everybody.
Hello all.
Thank you for that intro and that very long Ennio Morricone musical intro.
Once it started, I couldn't, it's just too dramatic. How do you stop that halfway?
I wasn't against the length. I just had the feeling that, when we did appear, it just couldn't deliver on all of the suspense that's presented by that song. No, it's just still us.
I was inevitably going to bring it down before you ever did. It's fine.
We are untouchables, in case anybody was wondering.
Literally.
Yeah. Hey everybody, how are you?
Yeah, we're back again. It's weird to be here. I don't know, for people who have watched in the past few weeks, I've been in alternative spaces on the shores of Lake Michigan with family. It was actually really wonderful to be out of the city, away from screens. Not that we haven't been away from screens in a certain sense anyway. We've been away from movie screens for now going on 4 months, but being in a kind of a picturesque location. I don't know, man. I could get back to the woods.
Yeah, I think Farihah, it's very photogenic, but your kind of brick wall background is striking me as rather claustrophobic today.
It's not that there are not others. That my apartment is actually reasonable in terms of space, but I fill it with all of my garbage that I live in. So you're going to have to deal with this particular piece that I've carved out as professionally acceptable for Zoom calls and hosting. But I think I've been asked on this show if it's a green screen, because it's such a generically Brooklyn set kind of background.
Well, it also feels a little bit like you could be at the Comedy Cellar or something like that on a Tuesday night, just ready to do a set of some sort.
Listen, it's an old building, it's an old brownstone, and I appreciate that about it, and I appreciate the brick, even if my toilet had to be fixed earlier this week, which is the first time another human has entered the apartment in several months.
We actually took a nice little break in Maine, my husband and I, and we went to a very nicely socially distanced B&B in which we didn't come in contact with the proprietors, and they left delicious baked goods on our doorstep and stocked our pantry for us, and we were right on a river. It was the first time we had been out of New York since the pandemic started, so it was the beginning of March. First time we had been out of Brooklyn even. And it was rejuvenating, I have to say. I don't think it's easy for everyone to get away, but I don't think it matters even where you go. If you're living in a city, it's starting to feel very claustrophobic. And it was really nice to just be near water and trees and air. And I highly recommend it. But I'm excited to be back. This is the first time that the three of us are on in a few weeks, actually.
Oh, so, that's right. Yeah, because you weren't here last week, and Farihah was not there for our big Independence Day shindig.
Yeah, I was boycotting. I had other work that day.
Well,
I think it's good to reinvestigate Independence Day from the inside, and I appreciated that you did that and how many contributors came on. And I was sad to miss it, actually. The FOMO increased as I saw the number of hosts expanded to 11 or 12.
The next time we do that, we're going to have 25 people host.
Everybody, you're going to do an exquisite corpse where everybody just says one word to try and create the manifesto of a new age, I guess.
I know we should ask the viewers how they feel about that, if they want us to get that radical.
I don't know, but I'm excited about today's show for
Yes,
sure. We have some wonderful people on.
Yeah,
Both people that we've talked about having for weeks. We were like, when is the right time? What is the right pairing? And I think they both spoke so highly of each other, and we're excited to be on together that it was really nice to finally have them on and like get the right moment, because as is often the case on the Reverse Shot show, Happy Hour show, we like to have people who like come from slightly different backgrounds and find an interesting way to have their work practice intersect.
Yeah, we also have our first road correspondent, or a road guest, I should say, this week, who'll be coming on in the second half of the show, calling in from, I guess, should I not say where he is? Because he's a little paranoid about that.
I don't think we even know, so.
No, I heard mention of an interstate, but
Why would you tell people the exact interstate that he's on? I just hope that he's also accused of having a green screen. I don't want to be the only one.
I just want to say I'm getting to have both Ina and Nick on. We will introduce them shortly. Ina Archer and Nicolas Rapold. He's giving me very warm feelings and flashbacks to the days of the Film Comment podcast, which of course is something that we pay tribute to and is a great inspiration on this show. And just so many times we were I think a pretty nice trio. So I'm feeling warm, nostalgic feelings.
Well, should we bring Ina out? You know, Ina Archer is an artist, writer, a film conservator, and also works at the Museum of African American History and Culture. She's written for Film Comment a ton. And as Michael alluded to, has been on the podcast a bunch with him and Nick Rapold. And so why don't we bring Ina on? Because she actually helped spark the theme for today's show in our correspondence prior to her appearing.
Hey, Ina.
Hey, hello.
Hello there.
Hey, now, are you going to let Ina tell us what it is?
Sure.
The theme?
Yeah.
How we watch.
Mhm.
How we watch.
Yeah, how we watch. I guess I'll put it that way. I had been complaining, or not complaining, but kind of mentioning that, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was getting very polite requests for what to watch, to kind of edify people more about the struggles of African Americans, what movies were important to me, and that kind of thing. And in trying to make a list, which is already, a sort of a lost cause, it occurred to me that it wasn't so much what to watch, but how to watch. Mm-hmm. And since that time, it's, how to watch has become everything, but from how to kind of encounter films and to think about them in ways that I think especially African-American film fans have to do all the time. Where can you, what's missing or what's there, just, sort of opening up of a way to look at films, all the way to, how I'm actually taking in films now. If it's the same, well, I know it's not the same experience, but, how it relates to experiences that I've had, going to films in New York. I have this constant nostalgia about being in New York and going to films and all the different micro cinemas and different venues. That's not necessarily, that has been taken away in a sense, but it's kind of come into my living room through different streaming opportunities. And last but not least, kind of thinking about just, being nostalgic about the experience of being in a theater in all different kinds of ways. So
one of the things that I loved about, besides the fact that you just like casually tossed off this actually pretty poetic turn of phrase, was that, there's so many ways to approach that idea. The idea of how to watch a movie, how we watch movies as individuals and as communities. And the immediate reaction I had was like, of course, thinking about now, which you didn't actually include in the sentence. It wasn't how we watch now, but it's so tempting to immediately think about the circumstances that you're in. And granted, at these particular set of circumstances do feel sort of extraordinary, and that shifts the way that we view any kind of culture that we are experiencing for the first time or returning to. But what I also loved about it is that, like, regardless of what's happening in a macro sense, like, every individual is evolving over time, and anything that you look back at or revisit, you look at with completely different eyes. And, you know, the first time somebody said that to me, it was in the context of like a breakup. Like, you don't look at a breakup with somebody the same way 10 years later that you did a year afterwards. Like, you change, the person changes, the situation around you changes. So I just think there's like so much, it's so much, there's such a bigger scope there than initially meets the eye. And I think what would be great, because I think you are particularly suited to this theme, would be if we could back up and kind of talk about the various work that you do.
Oh, okay. So various is a nice way to describe it.
Hyphenate, a multi-hyphenate.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's well, my film work is very much about kind of collage, looking back at collage and montage in format, looking at earlier films, thinking about the loss of film, the loss of representations of Black people, or rethinking those. What happens if you take all the films, early Black films that were created by sparse looking filmmakers, and those films were abducted by aliens and taken to another place, and then, like, how does the world look at us? Recutting existing films in order to make myself the star, or certainly a presence in the films, which requires a lot of appropriation or borrowing or those kinds of things. And this intersects really well with my job, which is a fantastic job. Like, I couldn't ask for more, which is working as a film conservator. Yeah. And making sure, especially at the Museum of African American History and Culture, where the focus is on the production by and about Black people of all different kinds, of all different media, all different genres, and being able to make sure that these films are kept, but also accessed and kept in good condition, and really made part of the history of film. Being read as an important, not important, I think the central through line in thinking about a history of film. So
it's such a fascinating thing to talk about right now. I've talked about, like, what preservation means. I feel like that conversation, just because there's so much to talk about right now, and even the way that we talk about movies, or the way we're talking about how we watch movies, and generally where the conversation has been going culturally, industrially, this idea of preservation hasn't really been discussed as much, but it seems so incredibly central right now, because to me, movies now, like, the history and legacy of film and representation, as that implies, seems so incredibly important. But if no one's doing the actual work of preservation and historicizing and putting things in the proper context and actually literally restoring and saving things, it'll all be lost. So it's to me, it's like the central part of the puzzle that's not being talked about.
Yeah, I think it's or it's talked about. I mean, I think initially in talking about film preservation, when the topic was becoming more popular, or more sort of coming into the popular imagining, it was always the story about loss, and this race against time, and you're going to lose these classic films, while actually film conservators and preservationists were working as well on the the less important kinds of films. And so that legacy of possible loss is still there, but I think now it feels a little bit more like it's there somewhere, so we just need to take care of it. And, like, what entity will help to take care of it? And certainly the whole idea of digitization makes assists, but also sometimes kind of obscures what's happening. So it's like, oh, we digitized this film, so we have it now. It's saved, it's preserved, and it's kind of like, no, it's actually been digitized, but does the object itself still exist? Is it at someplace? Does it live someplace where it can continue to be kept well and accessed, over and over again? And the access part of it is really key. And I think right now we're getting the benefit of that access a lot. Being able to see these films that were, that you can just stream it. It's there to be, either through museums or through these other sites where they're getting a new life, I think. Or at least I hope so, that people can kind of relate to them in a little bit more, in an easier way. So it's not like, oh, come to the screening of a preserved film because, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, watch this amazing film on TV, and you can, and really enjoy it. And there's so much, gets discovered there.
I remember doing an interview with, along these lines with Kent Jones a number of years ago when he was working at the World Cinema Foundation. And he made a really interesting point that I'd never quite really thought of it in that sense. We were talking about their work, and, obviously I love to see movies on the big screen. I think everybody should see everything on the big screen, but, he said something to the effect of like, it's like, it doesn't matter, like, to me, to him, as somebody who was working in conservation of film at that moment, he was like, I don't care if somebody sees Tuki-Buki on their phone or on their laptop or on a screen, but like the idea that now people can see Tuki-Buki in different forms is like the most important thing. And I feel like sometimes in the discourse around screens and the movie-going experience, we can sort of forget that question about access. Like, it's great that all these materials can be restored and preserved, but then they need to be circulated somehow.
And that also, like, film is such an important reflection of culture, particularly like throughout the 20th century. And if people don't feel like it's for them or that they have access to it, like, what are they missing about trying to understand our shared history? And I remember, Ina, being on a panel with you once. I think it was for the Film Society Critics Academy, like during New York Film Festival. Yeah, and that's where we met. And you said something that I think about truly all the time, which was just about how, like, people who have an impulse to say, like, oh, this film has sequences in it that are racist, or a character in it that is, like, a racist depiction or stereotypical depiction of a particular group. Let's, like, burn that shit down. that the problem with that is that, it's a total surface level response to a larger issue. And B, if you destroy the entire record of how racism has functioned in our culture, then what do we point to say that it existed? Like, it's a much harder thing what you're proposing, but I think it's so vital, and so goes to the nature of, like, why people who conserve and do archival work are crucial to our community.
Yeah, being able to keep that record and to be able to, question it, take it apart. I was, Raquel Gates wrote a really great op-ed for the Times today that was in part addressing the Gone with the Wind, removal and then context, as well as her love for Golden Girls. And removing the program where they somehow end up in blackface because they're doing a face scrub or whatever. And and I mean that Gone with the Wind thing was just mortifying to me, and it seemed like a really slippery slope. And I'm glad that you remembered that. I think it's so thank you. But it's I struggle with it in different ways at different times. And I think when I was younger, I was just more like, it's not me. Put that stuff out there. You know, I don't care.
Right.
You know,
I didn't do it.
Yeah. You just remember somebody did it. So
Right.
you know, call them out on that. But other times I feel like, oh man, I am so sick of seeing this image.
Yeah.
But you know, it's also a reminder. It's like, okay, you know, we definitely don't want to do that again. The Gone with the Wind issue, you know, is one of the things is that you lose Hattie McDaniel.
Mm-hmm.
And she's such an interesting figure and such a great character actor, and she's an actor. You know, she's not a mammy. She's a person who's you know, a skilled performer, and you also don't want to lose those. You don't want to lose that part of the record either. So
it's also, you know, how can you possibly trust a decision being made by some huge corporate entity? You know, they think that they're going to solve this issue by just taking it off their platform. That's not any kind of correction of the historical record. That's not helping anybody. It's how could you trust anything that who was it? Was it HBO or was it
HBO? Yeah.
Or whoever? Yeah. I don't know. Or Netflix or an Amazon. Like, how could you trust that decision being made by a faceless corporation? So.
And plus, it's like you might as well, you know, Turner Classic Movies would have to take down their entire library, basically, from a whole period of time if you really started to look at things. So, you know, and I have a fear that it would be some kind of situation where they went and pulled these minstrel shows or these other kinds of representations out of the films. And also, you know, and not talking about Turner Classic Movies in particular, but I think there's something disingenuous about that. It's like, you know, if the movie was making you money by it continuing to be in circulation, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know, someone might have an issue with it. So we'll put it aside. It just is insulting, and it's like, okay, since somebody caught you, you're going to do something. But
well, and speaking of how to watch, it's like, okay, explain to me how to watch. Like, that's the real work. And I think about this in terms of like filmmakers putting out work now and like being caught in this moment where they're like, oh no, I like already made this movie and now I'm realizing that maybe there should have been different people behind it, or there should have been, you know, different team working on the ground. And it's like, if you just put it out there or remove it, that's not going to change the fact that it exists. Like the courageous thing is to make the effort to tell me, you know, what you think was problematic about it and how to watch differently. And like, I know that's a massive amount of work to like ask all these corporate entities to say like, get someone who's the appropriate person to talk about this like historical context, and hope that people read it in the little blurb. But like, why not? Why don't we center those conversations?
Seems so easy. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Oh, I would say it seems so easy to do, right? It's easy to if you're going to introduce something, if you're going to present something, to contextualize it in a certain way. But it really has not been for people for decades and decades. It just isn't in the forefronts of their mind. Like, just very briefly, I'm going to mention an anecdote. My husband and I went to years ago, 5-6 years ago, we went to, maybe more, to Lincoln Center to see a Judy Garland film. You know where this is going.
Yep.
It was Babes in Arms, okay? It is introduced in a very extensive introduction by a Judy Garland scholar. So basically the gist of it was just like, oh my God, this is going to be a fabulous film, and isn't Judy great? But he spoke for like 20 minutes. Not once did he mention you're going to be seeing a 15-minute climactic blackface sequence. Not once. And we didn't know because we'd never seen the film. So this thing is building to this minstrel, and like you could see people just like falling, like everyone just everyone just sinking into their seats, which is truly nightmarish. And it would have been such an easy time to contextualize this and prepare people for what they were about to see. The fact that that was never even mentioned says a lot about how people have not been thinking about these things for very long.
Yeah, Babes in Arms and Babes on Broadway is like a double a double feature of terror. So,
But to get away from that, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Not to talk about so much things that you can't see or maybe taken away. What have you seen lately, Ina, that you have found particularly interesting, inspiring, things that have surfaced that you may not have seen in the past?
I was saying the other day in my email that I think, I was laughing at Letterboxd. I was like, what's that? Who needs that? But I need it. But I can't remember anymore. But I watched Bone recently with Yaphet Kotto. And that really made a huge impression on me. It was, he's basically playing a black savage, sort of in LA, who breaks into a white family's house, or he takes them captive in the house, and wants to have the man go and withdraw money from the bank to bring it back, and he's going to stay with the wife and ravish her. It was so smart and late 60s or early 70s. I can't remember what the date of the film is. So
1972, I think.
72? Oh,
yeah. I looked it up. I don't just know.
Oh, no. It was so, the characters, especially Yaphet Kotto's character, you realize is kind of enacting a sort of vision of how this couple might perceive him. But it ends up being really a lot about kind of the generation gap, this kind of California, not lazy life, but sort of, the couple is falling into this indolent kind of relationship with each other. He comes and sort of wakes it up, but also is kind of questioning, is also sort of talking about how he's, whether he's a savage or whether he's, having to teach these white people how to be human, but not in a way that's, he's not a savior to them at all. But I really liked it. And I liked seeing Yaphet Kotto, who I didn't realize had such a long career. I think of him as being in Across 110th Street and playing police and things like that. And it was really great to see him play this kind of more like sexy, aggressive role.
He's an alien, correct? He's the original Alien. He's in,
oh, you know what? He is. I think so. And he's done a lot, and he directed a film, I found out. So I'm trying to find out more about that, but a movie where he plays a motorcycle cop who might be a little bit rogue, and the other thing that I really love him in, which I'm hoping will be easier to see, is Othello. That I don't know, I guess from the early 80s or late 70s, that was made by Liz White, and it's really an amazing all black version of Othello. And he's Othello, and it really shifts the dynamic in the play, and plus it's it's made into a screen length that's more digestible than the longer version of the play. So
Yaphet Kotto, certainly someone for further research. Like, I kind of grew up knowing that name, but you don't really, you don't do deep dives when you're a kid. You just kind of accept, oh, there's that character actor. He pops up.
Yeah.
Apparently he was almost Captain Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek The Next Generation.
Would have been.
He was like considered very seriously, I read.
That's really interesting.
I won't tell you why or how. I know this fact. I might like the show.
yeah, no, that would have been really amazing.
Not to slander.
Imagine if.
Yeah, no. I mean, in another,
I wonder if our next guest has thoughts about Yaphet Kotto. Our next guest, as you may have gleaned already, is one of the most famous men in film culture today. He's Nick Rapold. He's the editor-in-chief of Film Comment, man about town, New York City. You can see him everywhere all the time. And right now he's on the road. And so let's see if we can we bring Nick Rapold in?
He's like, take a drive with me. Let's go.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hello.
We can.
Again.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
The line's a little bit spotty, but I think it just adds to the sense of action that you brought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here. I have to apologize for being in transit. We're going to visit my partner's parents, so it's a bit of a drive, and we hit some traffic, and I don't know how cars work really. So, yeah. That's why I'm not in a stationary. But the upside is I can show you some sights.
Yeah, show us.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful trees and sky.
It's pure cinema.
It really is.
Ackerman, Kiarostami, it's all there. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making time even during your perambulations.
No, thank you.
I hear you have some interesting co-passengers.
Oh,
Not to
boy,
distract,
yeah.
but I'm just, I wouldn't mind a peek.
Okay. Well, for reasons that are too convoluted, we do have our two life cat companions with us. I'm a little hesitant to direct the camera to them, only because when we did that before, they were meowing until the very moment. I think they get very excited by the camera next to them, by the phone next to them. Maybe at the end. Maybe at the end, okay, just so we don't have them meowing for the entire thing.
Yeah, no, I understand. Film talk is extremely exciting, and they get all worked up. It happens. This is a very cat-friendly show.
I think the image quality of doing art is itself saying a lot about the theme for today's show. How we watch a little with some anxiety and a little stuttering.
Yeah, I managed to reduce my whole screen to like a paper bookmark size strip. So now I'm just like, what's happening? So I just, in case I have a confused look, but anyway.
Seems like good now.
How have you been, Nick? What have you been up to?
I've been all right. I've keep busy, staying in peak fighting condition, staying fit, spending a lot of time with the cats, reading, a little writing, watching a lot of movies. Actually, someone just mentioned, I was looking at the chat just now, the little break with Elton Jones a month ago. I was going to mention that. He is, Yaphet Kotto's in that. It's really good. So yeah, watching, I guess like a lot of people undertaking different viewing projects. I think just a way of structuring time, and one of them has been we can talk about actually watching movies kind of right at the turn of the 70s, so 69, 70, 71, thereabouts. A bit as a kind of an analogy to now, just loosely in the country. So yeah, I don't know.
I was wondering, Nick, because of the how we watch theme, if there's anything that you've revisited, because we're all portioning out our time differently these days, socializing less, viewing more, perhaps. Like, is there anything that you've watched recently and kind of had to confront seeing it with fresh eyes?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a few things like that. I mean, some of it is guided a bit by laziness and what's on streaming when I don't want to work too hard to find something any other way. So, you know what? I'll pick the fun one. I recently watched the entirety of Spaceballs.
The entirety. I like the thought that
From beginning
you just
to end.
skip around.
I watched the full opus, yeah. And that was strange because in a way, I mean, maybe you have the same thing, but with movies you watched countless times in childhood, I don't even know if you can see them anymore. So I don't even know how. I mean, I was watching it and I kind of found myself tuning in and out of what was happening because I already knew every line of Spaceballs. And because you had to, in order to converse with other people of your age when I was in school. Given that some conversations could be entirely conducted in the form of lines from Spaceballs. And so, yeah, it was kind of interesting. But at the same time, I would somehow click back into like sentient adulthood and thinking, oh, Mel Brooks is master of XYZ, you know, like just the absolute like economy, like I can just, every single scene is, every single exchange is a line, and I realized how much I appreciated it, whether or not the gags are just like, you know, ridiculous or predictable or, you know, sticky. It was just so efficient and perfect in that regard. And very, very young Bill Pullman.
Oh, yeah.
I guess his first starring role is in Spaceballs. So it's historic, that film. Also, a crucial document of the Cold War, I think. It really needs time to live and laugh and love again with the help of it.
I was just thinking of this only because I'm sorry to interrupt, just because you brought up Bill Pullman, and I guess that's what we'll talk about now for the rest of the hour. One of the things that has happened to me a lot, and this is a little off topic, but it's about how we watch as we change and as we get older, is that I realize when I'm older that I actually had a crush on someone as a kid, but didn't know that I did because I was not like a self-aware queer person. So I realized now that I had like a really big crush on Bill Pullman as a kid in Spaceballs.
Who didn't? Right. Oh, I don't know about Spaceballs, but yeah.
What about in Casper or While You Were Sleeping? Either of those? Okay.
And everything. Because I realized now that I was like drawn to him in some way. I don't know why, but I was drawn to him in some way, and it has to have been a crush. I mean, and it was sort of, you know, it was all purpose. I was very into Elizabeth Shue too, like very into Elizabeth Shue.
Me too.
I specifically asked about those films because I feel like between those two and Spaceballs, we covered 3 very different phases of life in which you continued to appreciate Bill Pullman. It's like young Bill Pullman in Spaceballs, and While You Were Sleeping, he's sort of like the young Cad brother, and then in Casper, he's a daddy.
And then the most I've ever appreciated him was when we were out in LA in January when we showed Feast of the Epiphany, and Bill Pullman was coming out of the theater. He had just watched Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life.
Wow.
Very nice to see. Yeah.
Wait,
How did I miss that? When did that happen?
It was like the third night. I think that was the night that you weren't there.
Oh, plus you were probably trying to play it cool.
Really?
You're like, you know, deep in thought, wanted to discuss the film with his friends. It was nice.
I had a rewatch of a film of like sort of similar resonance for me, Nick, which I actually watched with Jeff and Michael in our weekly co-viewing distantly club. We watched Clueless, which is a film that I don't think I ever viewed like from the perspective of, I don't know, just like a thinking human. It was always like, this is a fun movie, or like this is a comforting thing that I like watch with my sisters over the holidays. And there's a whole other conversation to be had about why that is. And actually I was thinking of this great article by Amy Nicholson from a couple of years ago, a critic named Amy Nicholson, about why like romantic comedies are automatically viewed as like light or less than or like not real movies. And it's because there's a thread that is driven by or potentially for the like aesthetic pleasure of women. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or that it has to be dumb. So that, putting that in a little bucket, I had never watched it thinking about like, what are the aesthetic properties of this movie? And I don't know why I did that day, because typically our movie club is like a lot of snarky chatting and a little bit of drinking or, you know, flip flop, I don't know. And I remember thinking all the way throughout that like, this is an extremely good and well-made movie. It's not just satisfying. It's not just like sweet and cute and cool. I was like, these are legitimately great performances. Stacey Dash, though we've lost her, has in some sense, I still mourn her loss, like is so incredible. Donald Faison in that like young early role, yeah, is like, he delivers these lines that would be really difficult to do. It's actually a tightly written script, and not every young person can deliver that work, let alone like some of the framing, cinematography. The title sequence, of course, is a real classic. And I found myself just becoming more and more enraged that like Amy Heckerling is not still working at the level of male directors of a similar skill from that time period.
The Netflix party phenomenon to me is something when Ina sort of put forward the idea of like how we watch, if you had told me in like even February of this year that one of the things you look forward to every week would be like opening up a laptop, watching a movie in a very small space while you chat with your friends on the side of it, I would have said, God, that sounds terrible.
Horrifying, yeah.
But there's been something really comforting, and it's made me think a lot about like, it's not exactly why we watch, but like the things, the different ways movies can interface with our lives and the different kind of use value in a sense they can have for us. I mean, like, yes, go to the movies, see the masterpiece on the big screen, watch 2001 on 70, of course, but like this weekly ritual that we have where we've been rewatching a lot of 90s films, I think, or visiting them for the first time. I mean, I remember the very first movie that we watched in this club was To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, which I'd actually never seen when it came out. And the whole movie, I was just like typing into the chat, like how beautiful it was. Like seeing the movie in the 90s, like shot on film, and you could see that like the light fading at dusk in the small town, it was so beautiful. It sort of, even though watching it on this tiny screen while we were all saying snarky things, it's, you know, it's reminding me of things I like about movies.
Can I just say that since you so often were typing, this movie is so beautiful, I started to think that you were perhaps high.
It was like give me like a middlebrow like comedy from the 90s, and the look of like the light hitting things in that, as opposed to like anything that you would see in a Marvel film of today. Please, I will take that other thing.
I actually wanted to ask Ina, because when you were emailing me earlier in the week about this idea, this how we watch, you mentioned Lubitsch, and since we're talking about romantic comedies of the 90s, I'm really interested in why you've decided to go back to Lubitsch during the pandemic.
I associate him with summer, which is, you know, I think when there would be a chance to see, like, go to a festival of Lubitsch films, I just love them anyway. So I guess I think of them as something that would be comforting. And you know, when I was being asked what to watch, I was like, well, the thing that I like to watch would be Lubitsch. And there's something about his films where I just enjoy them, and I'm never questioning what's going on in them. It's never, you know, I mean, I don't think that's in the front of my mind. They're beautiful, joyful. I like the fact that for my favorite Lubitsch films, the characters are, you know, if they're either on the cusp of marriage, or if they're married, they don't have children yet. They're in this realm that's still very romantic and fun. It's very adult. I like the froth and you know, for the Maurice Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald films. And I just find them very, very joyful.
Yeah, I mean, comfort movies are, I mean, that's part of what it's about right now. It actually made me think, Nick, when I was on, I don't know if, Nick, are you hearing? I know you've muted.
I'm hearing. I muted just because I didn't want you guys to hear the car noise and that sort of thing.
No, I understand. When I was on, I wanted to bring this up, when I was on your new podcast, which we want to mention, newish podcast, called The Last Thing I Watched.
The Last Thing I Saw.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
We talked a little bit about, you know, comfort rituals, or what we're watching or how we're watching, because I was on with Amy Taubin, and I was talking about going through the Michelle Pfeiffer filmography, just because I find her just such a comfort. And she was in quite a number of really good romantic comedies of the 90s. I find this kind of her star text in general kind of comforting right now. To kind of like feel like a completist for a star's persona. Is there anything that well, first of all, I just wanted to tell people to listen to that podcast, because it's a lot of But also, is there anything else that you've been watching, or what's the last thing you watched?
What was the last thing I saw? Well, tune into the hit podcast, The Last Thing I Saw, to learn the last thing I saw. Last thing I saw. Well, yeah, I mentioned just briefly that I was kind of watching things in the late 60s and early 70s. Basically what happened is first I watched Eyes on the Prize, which I talked to Eric about on The Last Thing I Saw. The Eyes on the Prize, the Civil Rights Movement documentary series from the late 80s, to get me like a kind of overview of the late 50s and the 60s. And then I watched a bunch of movies in the late 60s and the early 70s that in some ways touched on race issues. And it was kind of fascinating to watch, you know, get the actual social fabric of the time, and then watch how movies did or didn't, you know, address it or constantly bring in, as well as just like the general, you know, social movements and social upheaval going on at the time. So that would kind of became kind of obsessive, and I kind of had this thing where I was obsessively looking for like the earliest like origin points or flashpoints in like say post 1968, like what movie really, I don't know what to say, really touches a nerve or really breaks some boundaries in like American movies. You know, I'm not talking like Bonnie and Clyde and the kind of mythologized ending of that, you know, how that still can seem kind of sanitized if you're watching something 2 years later, you know. But like for example, movies that have really kind of rattled me in a way were not always to do with civil rights, like The Honeymoon Killers, the movie I had not seen in a long time.
The Honeymoon Killers? Yeah.
Honeymoon Killers.
Honeymoon Killers.
Which is 69, I think, and I watch it, and first of all, you know, you want to go back and reread Manny Farber on one thing, but it's just such a unsettling, you know, litany of offenses against like trusting people, and by two kind of, you know, I don't know, ordinary misfits, dysfunctional / psychotics, you know. But to see it just like so matter-of-factly, kind of, you know, it makes Haneke look less shocking 20 years later, you know. But something like that, and then I watched Joe.
I wanted to watch that the other day. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. So that also, I had always slotted it in my head as like a vigilante kind of precursor. And a lot of it's really hokey, but there's this weird like mix of like hokiness, but also like attempts at reckoning. And then it ends up having to do with class as much as race. And it's also like Taxi Driver is like Paul Schrader must have just like partly like rewritten that script in a way of Joe to make Taxi Driver. And so I talked about this a bit with Eric. So sorry, Eric, for the review, but just how the DNA for movies like that feed into more exploitation stuff in the early 70s and all into stuff later. And then like another movie, a bit later, I was also interested in black filmmakers, you know, because just as there were like, you know, there was like the group of filmmakers in the 90s that were able to make 1 or 2 films and then not as many later. In the 70s, early 70s, I also was interested in watching movies by black filmmakers who then didn't go on to make others. Top of the Heap is one example of that, which is just a fascinating movie that's just on Amazon. And that's by Christopher St. John, who was an actor who was also in Shaft. And he makes this movie which is about, he plays a cop, and it's about brutality, sometimes his part. It's also just about his alienation. It's also like a kind of a, you know, what's it called? I don't know. I kept thinking of like Wild Strawberries or something, and then also, you know, Sweet Sweetback, just because there are these dream and other vision sequences just intermixed throughout
think we're losing a little bit of the audio here, but I think we.
So it's just it's incredibly like audacious and really fascinating movie.
Okay, we're gonna have to cut you off. Just we're getting like every other word at this point.
So I'm gonna Nick, if you don't mind, I'm jumping in here, folks. Hi, I'm back. Nick, if you don't mind disconnecting and calling back on a phone, you can do that through Zoom, because we'd love to have you participate for the next couple of minutes, but I think you're getting a little bit too choppy, and I want to make sure we all get a chance to talk. So maybe just hang up and call back in using a phone, and we can actually hear your beautiful voice in a clearer sense for the last couple of minutes.
I did hear him talk about a film called Top of the Heap, which I've not seen, but I found a link to it. I put in the chat. And of course, Sweet Sweetback's badass song. I remember seeing that movie in college and having, like, coming into it with a certain perception of what it might be like, and then seeing those dream sequences, like Nick is talking about, the sequence where just like images is like lap dissolved on top of image over image over image, and just like, wow, this is a wildly, wildly strange and fascinating movie.
I got to see The Spook Who Sat by the Door. That was, it came on Screen Slate, worked with Ivan Dixon's daughter in order to show that film, and that was amazing. I think it kind of fits into the realm of the films that Nick was talking about. It was such a great opportunity to see that, and it was one of the most striking films I've seen in a long time.
Had you seen it before, Ina, or was it?
I'd never seen it before. I always wanted to see it, and it was good. So I had no idea what to expect, or I had these ideas of, I don't know. I thought it was going to be some kind of strange, gritty black and white. I don't know. I don't know what I thought it was going to be. And also, it was a little bit downplayed at home because it was like a spook. Just the title and all seemed like it might not be appropriate viewing. So I was really amazed at the performances, the story, the cynicism, or not cynicism, or just the expressiveness of it. It made me think a lot of the advertising film.
Putney Swope.
Yeah, Putney Swope.
Oh yeah.
How are people feeling about new movies right now? Because I realized, I think it was probably late April, that I hadn't seen a new movie in quite some time, and have been trying to like concertedly carve out space to like make myself watch a new film, whether or not I'm excited about that film or excited about the way I'm viewing it or not, but just to like feel that there is still some sort of advancement and new things being added to the conversation. Are you all feeling similarly, or maybe you're all seeking out new movies?
I have to say, part of how I watch right now is that I can't seem to stay awake during a film. And I don't know whether it's because it's coming in the apartment, and I'm not really sort of forced to get past any little anything that might distract me from it. So I feel a little guilty about that. But because I don't necessarily think it's the quality or not of the film. I think I'm just also my ability to watch through a film has become really, it's like, if it's any longer than 70 minutes, I can't make it. Although I can't say that about Feast of the Epiphany, that I watched with great joy, and I'm not just trying to, blow you guys. It was really, that's one of the films that I really enjoyed seeing a new film, and was, glad to get a chance to see it. I was feeling very, fortunate to be able to get a chance to tune in. I watched The Five Bloods and really enjoyed that, but there's something about new films. I think I'm a little spoiled or something, where I don't hang in there for it. And I think if I was, assigned to go and see it, or was at a theater, or I would be much more attentive.
Yeah.
I've been watching new work in an attempt to support new models that theaters are trying to use. Again, there's a larger conversation, one we've dug into a little bit in a previous happy hour about missing the movie theater experience. But I don't know to what extent those new models are helping our theaters stay afloat or not. But it's through that and some film festivals that I've watched stuff. If anything, sometimes it's like trying to parse through what's out there, because everybody's trying to figure out how to share the work now, that I'm not always sure what to get. And I think there's just something about being at home. I know that while it does put you in a sleepy state sometimes, there's also this feeling of like, okay, well, I guess this is my time to catch up on stuff. I don't know what that impulse is. I guess it's just such a strong association between like going to a theater for the opening weekend of something, and that's the way that you see it. And it doesn't feel as weird to watch repertory on a screen at home. I don't know if it's that, but I'm trying, especially for work that comes up here, work that I know is like being discussed in some way socially. So like, I watched Disclosure because I wanted to know how I felt about that and how Kaden would talk about it on the show.
Disclosure, the recent documentary. I just wanted to.
Yes. Everyone's like, Farihah, it's not that recent.
I'm not talking about the very limited reverse sexual harassment.
Well, weren't you talking about Applause a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah.
And the whole time I was like, I love Applause. It's so funny that they're talking about that. And I'm thinking of the movie from like 1929, but
it was.
Oh, you were? Oh, okay.
It was Aliza Ma was on, and it was that was the film she brought as her kind of perfect New York film.
Okay. Because I thought I saw a film like an ad for a movie called Applause that was made recently, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I know. Look at you. Right, but okay, good. So I'm relieved.
This is Reverse Shot Happy Hour. Of course, we're talking about the Mamoulian.
Hello.
Eric, you're programming a virtual cinema, and there are all these.
Well, I mean, among a lot of art houses around the country, that virtual cinema came around in the days immediately after the beginning of the pandemic, as a way for art house distributors to independent distributors to continue to release these films that would be in art house theaters. So it's been a good collaboration between the distributors and the theaters to be able to sort of go 50-50. Like we'll help each other and have these films get out there. But it'll be interesting as we continue to go. And I think there were some ideas that we could make our way into the theaters in a more robust way by now, and we're not going to. And exactly what our viewing habits will continue to be, because I think in the first couple of weeks, virtual cinemas seemed like a really exciting possibility in terms of seeing these films at home. And I think that now it's another thing that you have to choose them from among, streaming services, DVD players, whatever it might be, that, how do we get people to see the new films instead? But I like where you were coming from, Jeff, and sort of saying, no, I need this. I forgot this, or I haven't made space for this. It's time I made space for this again. But I think that's kind of what it's going to take for us to remind ourselves that there's several different streams of film that we want to keep in our lives, rather than just the one that's easiest or the one that's loudest. But that's the fight we've been fighting for a long time in terms of independent cinema and independent exhibition. That there's the lowest hanging fruit is not necessarily the stuff we care most about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also that hopefully, I don't know, it's pretty dark sometimes, but it should sink in for people that this isn't, the novelty of quarantine has worn off, but it doesn't mean that the need has, and that we aren't going to be living like this for quite a long time. And so understanding how we continue to support the film community, and it's not just the theaters, it's the filmmakers, it's the the people who find themselves releasing something during this gap, in addition to like nourishing our desire to have like continuing work and ongoing discussion. Like this is how it has to happen. That's just it. So maybe that's a little a little bit of a hard end. I wanted to ask everybody what your favorite Ernst Lubitsch films are.
On Paradise.
To be or not to be.
What?
To be or not to be.
No, that's way up there.
I like So This Is Paris. but I'm something about The Merry Widow that I really love as well.
And I feel like it doesn't get as much love for some reason.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
Widow.
and it's so.
No.
My favorite Lubitsch film is my favorite Christmas film.
Shop Around the Corner.
Ah,
It's mine too, and I watch it. I think when theaters were open, and I suppose now in a different form, I would watch it every year in the theater because I think like IFC Center maybe would play it, in their like Christmas roundup. And even though I've thought about this a lot, and I thought about it again when Ina brought up Lubitsch, that like sometimes the dynamic between the two characters is like this very old school idea about like what's sexy and cute between men and women, and that's annoying. But like I can't help but enjoy it because they're both still intellectual equals, even if there's like a slight, or maybe not so slight, like gendering because of the time period. It's like, speaking of films where it's like there's things that we can take and things that we can maybe put aside, understand that this is the case and talk about it, but like it doesn't I think that it still has so much value, and like again that like the neutered idea of what a rom-com should be now could like go back and take notes on that movie.
Well,
yeah, I think I want to change actually and say The Smiling Lieutenant.
I prefer that to The Merry Widow. I love
Yeah,
which was shot at the Astoria studio.
The studios, yeah.
Next to our Museum of Moving Image. But to your point, Farihah, in terms of the things you accept and things you set aside, I feel like so many of his films are built that way, in the sense that like all these Hungarian places and names, when nobody is Hungarian anywhere to be found. And you just accept it and love that there wasn't that care made from the beginning to change that because it's going to bother you. It's like, no, you can get past this. It's fine. Like,
I love that Shop Around the Corner, and a lot of those films are also like, it's not just about this central like hetero romance. Like Shop Around the Corner is a great example because the relation, like for other kinds of relationships that are built among the characters over time, are kind of like just as important to the overall construction of the film, which is still kind of rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should probably see if Nick has a favorite Lubitsch very quickly. I know we're running.
Muted. He's gonna have to unmute himself to do this.
I've been having like a real brain freeze trying to remember the Jennifer Jones one.
Clooney Brown.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
I like that one. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
You have a really good freeze right.
The thing about Nick throughout the last 20 minutes is it's making me long for 2001: A Space Odyssey. I feel like this is the end sequence as you're getting to the Jupiter sequence. Like you just keep freezing in these dramatic.
Or La Jetée.
Eyes slowly fluttering.
Jeff. The best part is not the background, but the face that Jeff made while he was waiting for someone to notice that he'd done it.
Well, thank you everybody for coming.
I actually have a toast in mind. I'm going to, if anybody else does, please add, but I actually wanted to toast Nick for his fortitude on the road, and then Ina for being the one person I noticed who did not laugh when the screen froze on Nick's journey.
And as ever, I want to thank our reverse shotters at home that have tuned in with us: Chloe Lazat, Chris Wisniewski, Devika Girish, Edo Choi, Ella Bittencourt, Jordan Kronk, and Justin Stewart. Thanks for being here with us. Thank all the rest of you for being here with us as well.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Please come back, both of you.
I will.
Cheers.
Bye. Have a good.
And there will be exit music, so hang out here if you want to.
Certainly will be.
There's on the way out.
Are we going back to the Untouchables or something else?
Something else.
Okay.
Ooh,
get ready.
Untouchables was really good.
I know. I didn't mention this, but Lucy, my dog, it really upset her. Her head popped up and she looked around really terrified.
We said we were cat friendly. We said nothing about dogs.
She doesn't really like De Palma.
Oh.
Not 80s De Palma.
All right, folks. See everybody soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.